This is a vintage Neumann U87 manufactured in Germany back in 1982. These mics are world famous for their clarity and realism and have been seen on countless photographs and movies, not to mention they've been heard as a vocal mic on countless hit records. I purchased this particular microphone off a Hollywood rental house back in 2008 for $3,000, and the last band to use it before I got it was Fishbone. Does it sound great? Of course it does. But to be completely truthful, there are a lot of other mics out there that cost far less that sound just as good, if not better. The only reason I ever bought this mic was to get clients through the door. Oh man, this one is going to be a lot of fun! If you're a studio owner or you would like to open a studio, there's going to be some great info in here to help you attract clients. Now, if you're in a band and you're looking to book a studio to record at, I'll point out the stuff to watch out for as well, because there is a lot of gear out there that looks like it's legit, but the truth is, it's just total fucking garbage. And if you're the kind of guy who wants to record himself and get some great results and not spend a bloody fortune on expensive gear that's completely unnecessary, this is definitely the video for you. Because sticker price does not always equal performance, here's a list of 11 things recording studios use to bait new clients. Number 1, Pro Tools. I just don't get it. How the fuck is this still a thing? 15, 20 years ago, it was basically, if you want to work in the industry, you gotta have Pro Tools. You want to work on label projects, you gotta have Pro Tools. Bands would come into the studio demanding you have Pro Tools. I know guys who would have a copy on hand just so they could answer yes to that question and then record the band in Cubase or whatever platform they chose to record with because, hey, it's Pro Tools and some of us actually would like to get work done. Somehow, this program, out of all of them, became the industry standard. And it's not because there's some kind of sonic advantage to it. There isn't. Most audio software sounds exactly the same unless it's purpose-built to add some subtle saturation, like Harrison Mixbus, which emulates the sound of a Harrison console. Very cool. Avid, the creators of Pro Tools, have jumped on the subscription bandwagon like so many other companies out there, and you can get yourself a copy of Pro Tools for the yearly $199, or you can buy it outright for $599, or get the ultimate version for $25.99. Wow, that'll sure get clients through the door. Now, let's not forget that Avid used to sell Pro Tools as a closed system. If you wanted the software, you had to buy the hardware, and it was not cheap. They insisted it had to be this way until someone hacked the drivers and released a video showing Pro Tools software running on a third-party interface. Yeah, so once that particular genie was out of the bottle, it was certainly a case of the entire music industry going, what the fuck? Now that we have the privilege of running third-party hardware on Pro Tools software, my question remains, why would anybody want to when you can buy a copy of Reaper for a whopping $60 and own it outright? And that includes upgrades, none of this yearly subscription bullshit. It has all the same functionality, plus you can customize it. Why is it so cheap? Because the guys who wrote it kicked the llama's ass back in 1997 and wrote Winamp, and then sold it to AOL for $80 million in 1999. In other words, the guys who wrote Reaper already got rich, so they don't need to rip off small studio owners by demanding a yearly tribute. Yo, it's Pro Tools. You got my fucking money? And as for the whole industry standard line of bullshit, well, the industry has a lot less impact than it used to. And bands can certainly record and release music themselves and get by just fine. Rest Repose did it a couple of years ago, and they released a record which broke the top 10 on iTunes and toured the US with 0 label support. It really depends on how much you, the band, want to hustle. Now, the advice I give to young bands still remains the same. Signing with a label is a lot like being a young boy locked in a room full of Catholic priests. You're gonna get fucked. So, I'm not entirely sure how much record labels demand Pro Tools projects anymore, or how relevant labels even are at this point for that matter. I don't think Pro Tools has quite the same mystique around it that it used to. Sure, it can be a selling point and you can repeat industry standard to potential clients in some vain hope that will get them to book, but honestly, I can't say for certain if anybody actually gives a fuck anymore. If you want to work on Pro Tools, that is absolutely fine, but if you're outfitting a home studio, it's just not a must-have like it used to be. Just because it says Pro doesn't mean your results will be. Number 2, the desk-sized mouse. This is a mouse. This is also a mouse. This moves the mouse onto the screen. The simple truth is, while these wonder gizmos look extremely cool, they don't actually add anything to your workstation. In fact, they might be just slowing it down. But they sure impress the hell out of the potential clients. To the untrained eye, i.e. the client you're trying to land, this says, wow, this is cool. This guy must really know what the hell he's doing. To anyone who's ever put time into a recording studio, these just scream, client bait! Client bait! Client bait! Got some client bait in here! Because they don't actually add any functionality or affect the sound in any way at all. All they've done is taken the digital controls off the screen and put them into the physical realm. And in the case of the Slate Raven, taking them off the screen and then put them onto a touchscreen. Now, the touchscreen might be really cool, but I can't test it because it doesn't work with Reaper. But don't worry, Reaper users, you're not alone. It doesn't work on Mac Big Sur either. Now, in my own experience, I was dumb enough to buy a Mackie Control Universal way back in 2002, and after having it a couple of years, I sold it because it was a very expensive paperweight that just slowed down my workflow. I found I could get work done a lot faster just by using a mouse and a keyboard rather than fuck around with all these pointless controls. Now, please don't confuse an actual mixing console that will impart a sound on a project. Those are very cool and still have a place as they tend to round off the sound in a way that digital emulators still haven't matched. But I'm talking about old school analog consoles. I'm not talking about big, expensive, desk-sized mice. If you're a small studio owner, don't bother with one of these. Invest in acoustic treatment because that will actually have an effect on the sound of your mixes. If you're in a band looking for a studio, don't look at one of these and go, ooh, this is cool. I want to work here. Because essentially, they're not doing anything than taking up desk space and looking cool. And while cool looking gear is nice, it's what's coming out of the speakers that actually fucking matters. Pay attention to that instead. Number 3, Klark Teknik Tube EQ. This is the legendary Pulse Technologies passive tube equalizer. It's wound up on many records and with good reason as it sounds utterly incredible. It also retails for just under $4,000. This is a cheap knockoff from Klark Teknik that sounds like fried assholes when you do a direct comparison to the original. Notice how close they look to each other? Yeah, there's a reason for that. If you walk into a studio and you see a bunch of these in a rack, take a closer look at the badges. If you see the Klark Teknik badge, then run away! Because the guy who wants to sell you studio time is trying to pull a fast one on you. I did a shootout on one of these last summer, and well, here's my opinion. Yeah, now I've got the remains of that smoldering hunk of guano up on the wall behind me as a reminder to everybody who watches this show, please don't buy this. You'll just be throwing your money away. It couldn't hold its own against the real thing, and it couldn't even hold its own against the $35 plugin emulation from Waves. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some fantastic hardware copies of the Pultec out there that are somewhat more reasonably priced than the original. But the Klark is most definitely not one of those, no matter how many people wish it were. Now, I took a lot of heat last summer for doing that review, mainly because a lot of small studio owners have been dumb enough to fall for the marketing behind these things and think they're getting a bargain version of an awesome EQ. Look, I understand nobody likes to be called out for making a stupid choice, and I do sympathize with those guys as it's far easier to write nasty comments on the video than to do an actual side-by-side comparison with the thing it's trying to rip off. Especially where the agenda isn't to sell you cheap knockoff tube EQs or to validate a dumbass purchase decision. My ultimate goal here is to save you, the small studio owner, some money. Because I know exactly how hard you guys work for it, and I hate seeing you throw it away on useless shit. Like this poor bastard who commented on Reverb.
Best deal in pro audio by far. I own 2 of these units, looking to buy a third ASAP. I swapped the tubes for new old stock tubes, and wow, just can't get over how good these units sound.
That's pretty easy to see who didn't do a before and after test with the tube swap. So not only did he throw his money away on a shit EQ, he wasted money on new old stock tubes that won't change jack shit. Because I did that test as well. Better, more expensive tubes have zero effect on that EQ. but people will believe what they want to believe without ever running a simple test. As the saying goes, there's a sucker born every minute. 4. Klark Teknik 1176. Not satisfied with ripping off the Pultec, Klark also does a bargain bin version of the classic Universal Audio 1176 FET limiting amplifier. Now, I haven't had a chance to try out the Klark, but the YouTube channel White Sea Studios did an utterly fantastic review on this and shot it out against a real 1176, a clone, and a plugin. I'd highly recommend checking out his video. The short version, yes, it belongs on the trash heap as well. And if you're looking for a place to record your band, once again, if you see those Klarks in the rack, run away! Seriously, they are pure client bait and outperformed by software plugins. Oddly enough, another company under the Music Tribe umbrella, the parent company for the Klark brand, is Midas. They make the 522 compressor that goes for a whopping $149. That sounds amazing! You can get 2 of them for the same price as a Klark, and the results are going to be far superior. Okay, new rule. For studios and bands, just avoid the Klark badge altogether. It'll save us all a lot of grief. Number 5, recording on a Mac. This is one of those weird ones where the client insists that everything has to be recorded on a Mac. I just don't understand this reasoning at all. The operating system is not going to affect the overall sound of the mixes, so why does anyone actually give a fuck? Mac, Windows, it's all pretty much functional these days. I recorded on a PC for years and years, and at one point I was booked solid for an entire year running a PC. These days I'm recording on Mac OS because I run a YouTube channel and need to get things done as quickly as possible with minimal fucking around. I just can't afford to have any downtime at all. The machine I have here crashes very rarely, whereas Windows can be a bit unstable. If you're running a small studio, a Mac might not be completely necessary. It all depends on your workload and how many clients you have coming through the door. If you don't mind the occasional downtime, a Windows PC will probably get the job done. But then again, a stable operating system is a great selling point to potential clients. Number 6, colored lights. Just to be extra super special clear so even the drummers understand, these won't affect your recordings one way or the other. But they can create a mood or a vibe, maybe? I don't know. I really haven't come across a test for vibe, so it's not like I can apply it in this situation. But as far as client bait goes, yeah, programmable colored lights can go a long way to impressing potential clients that your studio is the place to be for a fun, creative environment that will help them create their next masterpiece that nobody other than their friends and their parents are going to buy. And while you're at it, just make sure to dim those lights enough so nobody can read those Klark Teknik badges on that knockoff gear you've got sitting in your rack. Number 7, Avalon Mic Preamps. Other than placing these in the pro audio section of every guitar center on earth, I really don't see the attraction of these things. Sure, they're silver, they're pretty, and they sound good, but man, what a price tag! Apparently, these are really popular with the hip-hop guys, but let's be honest, once you get past a certain price point with preamps, it's really just a diminishing returns kind of thing. You can spend a whole lot more money for not a whole lot of improvement. Is an Avalon really twice as good as a Daking Pre 2? Fuck no! In fact, given the choice, I'd rather record with the Daking. And if you only need a single channel, like most vocals do, get the Heritage Audio HA73, as they'll cost you only $649 and will deliver the goods and not keep you indebted to the vampires that run the credit card companies. In my experience recording metal bands, I've been asked for Avalon preamps a grand total of 0 times. And that's absolutely great. However, if you want to record hip-hop, your mileage may vary. Just bear in mind, when trying to attract clients to your studio, how it looks is often more important than how it sounds. Nobody ever said musicians were smart. 8, impressive wall of tube amps. Total fucking client bait if I've ever seen it. Rock and metal guys love to show off a massive collection of tube amps as if to tell the potential client, these are my amps, I know what I'm doing, and I'm gonna make you sound like Crom. And then they plug you into an Axe Effects once they finally book studio time, because that takes all the guesswork out of recording high-gain guitars. Here's the truth. I recorded most of my major projects with 2 amps, a Mesa Dual Rectifier and a 5150. This collection here really didn't grow until I started doing YouTube and I discovered rev amps, which for me anyway, made the job of recording guitar much easier. And I've definitely added to my collection over the years as I've been fortunate enough to work with many different amp brands. I got a band coming in this summer to lay down an EP, and yes, we've got quite a few amps to choose from, but I could still wind up doing the project with my 5150. Or a Neural Quad Cortex for that matter. Now, the great thing about digital systems is that they'll give you endless options. The bad thing about digital systems is they'll give you endless options and you run the risk of never being able to decide what the fuck to go with. Number 9, Apogee Converters. Once again, this is something the clients might ask for by name. Not because they're inherently better than the competition, because they're not. But it's a brand name with a bit of mystique, therefore there's a false notion that having a set of Apogees will somehow magically make your record sound better. Let's cut the bullshit for a minute. Most converters are all using the exact same chips to do the actual analog to digital conversion. Of course, then the argument shifts to the analog circuitry built around the converter, like that's going to somehow magically make everything better. It might, but maybe by about that much. And if that's worth the extra thousands to you, by all means, whip out that plastic and find out what it's like to work for the credit card companies. Because here's an unpleasant truth to everyone who spent too much on their converters. The lowly Behringer ADA 8000 won a blind shootout on gearsluts.com, much to the surprise of the actual sluts. That was one of the most hilarious threads ever. A $200 converter that went up against some units that cost thousands more than those did. Turns out the Behringer sounds absolutely fine, just don't clip the signal because you'll know if you do, it'll sound like shit. Of course, you're never going to impress anyone with a rack full of these, but they will get the job done. If you're trying to attract clients, you might want to go with something different and maybe a little bit prettier. If you're trying to get some actual work done and need an extra 8 channels of conversion, get one of these. Number 10, loud playback with a subwoofer. Okay, I'll admit right here, I am totally guilty of this, and I'm proud to admit I've booked many a client using this method. Blast the shit out of your previous mixes and crank up that sub. Damn, that sounds huge. Worked great in my old studio, which I worked out of until 2003. Here at my new place, not so much, as I never bothered to install a sub because I've got soffit mounted monitors. Here's a little hint. If you're in a band checking out a studio, ask the engineer to turn the mix down so you can listen at a comfortable level. Because louder doesn't always mean better. Find out how things sound at a reasonable volume. Do they still sound impressive? No? Then maybe it's time to check out another studio. But for you guys trying to grow your business, the subwoofer is your friend. It's no secret that guys love earth-shattering bass. Make sure that you can deliver the goods. Number 11, Neumann U87. Oh yes, my vintage U87. I bought this mic as a present to myself for quitting smoking. Even though it was manufactured in 1982, it held its value and I picked it up for $3,000. And the sole reason was to book clients, because I'd been asked the question several times, do you have any Neumann mics? And it's a truly great mic that works a lot of the time depending on the vocalist. Other times, I'd work with other mics. But it's that brand mystique that really sells studio time. Like, take the Sony C800 mic. It's really popular with the hip-hop crowd, and you can pick one up for a cool $10,800 at Sweetwater. During my time in Hollywood, a certain hip-hop artist had booked out the studio for a week and had asked for the C800 by name. And the reply was, sorry dude, you're gonna have to make do with the vintage U48 that Adele had her biggest hit with. Thing is, I really don't even think that those mics are even necessary to get amazing results. Not the U87, not the U48, and certainly not the C800. One of the best mics I've ever used in my entire career has been the JZ67, which is made in Latvia. Works on everything from guitar to vocals to drum room, and you can get one for $649. And I have zero issue putting one of those up against a $10,000 mic, because it sounds great. Will it impress the clients as much as U87? No, because it doesn't have the mystique. It's a relatively unknown brand, which is a fucking travesty because they make really amazing mics. To wrap all this up, the phrase buyer beware comes to mind. You can spend an awful lot of money on gear for not that much sonic benefit. And while name dropping expensive brands might help some of the time, The majority of your clients won't know about them or even care. On the other hand, bands can spend a lot of money on studio time for things that might not be as awesome as they seem. Hopefully this video will be useful to two groups: the studio owner trying to build a business and the band trying to work within a limited budget. And here's a final word of advice for the bands. Once you strip away the colored lights and the shitty knockoff gear, it's what's coming out of the speakers that really matters. Take a close listen to what's coming out of them at a reasonable volume. Now ask the guy trying to sell you studio time a simple question. Are those impulse responses and drum samples we're hearing? If the answer is yes, just record it yourself.